Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last chapter in our discussions on Gita. Uh, so we were just discussing that this is almost going to be 9 months for us. We started recording these sessions 9 months back, and we're very glad that we have been able to complete this series with this particular final chapter. The chapter is titled Freedom and Renunciation. And if Kabir, you can start off with your summary of the chapter.
Sure. Yeah, I believe that last three chapters, I guess, chapter 16, 17, and now chapter 18, are focusing more on how part, not so much on the what part. It's not talking too much, it's not clarifying the philosophy anymore. It seems that uh, Krishna has clarified philosophically, intellectually, and even experientially. Arjun has had glimpses now. So Krishna has been more focused over the last three chapters on the how part. Usually, when people are convinced and they even had a glimpse and they want to walk on the path, then there are some practical aspects, practical questions which come. And that's what I believe Krishna has been dealing with. So even in this chapter, he starts with Arjun's question actually to differentiate between life of a monk, a renunciate, versus tyag, or someone who would just be a karma yogi, for example, right? And so Krishna explains that beautifully, and then he moves on to further clarify any potential questions related to because when you are reading a text like Bhagavad Gita, it's very easy for someone to get into this zone. And I think I was one of them when I read Bhagavad Gita for the first time, that I just this idea that I'm more than body mind, that I have had many body minds and I am actually the soul, the consciousness, and this is just one of the body minds. Just that intellectual idea even was so revolutionary for me that it was very natural for mind to then say, then how does it really matter what I'm doing or what I'm not doing? Maybe I should just become a monk. Maybe I should just not do anything, which is also a trick of mind, in which Krishna highlights in this chapter. So he's clarifying to Arjun that the way you are, your tendencies, and that's where he goes into differentiation of tendencies between sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic tendencies, and also what work people do. And that's how Bhagavad Gita covers the concept of caste, which actually got muddled up later in our society, where caste became like a genetic thing. If you are son of a kshatriya or a warrior, you'll become a warrior. If you were a child of a shudra, like a cleaning person, you couldn't become a teacher, for example. So that was not the case, definitely, in Bhagavad Gita, the way it is covered. So the way caste is covered in Bhagavad Gita is just depends on your personality type. Like as a counselor, sometimes we do testing for clients to find out what personality type they are. Are they introvert? Are they extrovert? Do they like high energy kind of roles, or do they like roles which are kind of slow? They want to take it slow and so on. So depending on one's personality type, one's sanskaras and tendencies, caste is kind of decided, and it's not like someone else will decide for you. It is for you to be smart enough to decide what is your calling. And Krishna at one point quite clearly tells Arjun that it is better to die doing what is your dharma, or what is your duty, rather than working on someone else's dharma, which specifically, as I understand, means that you should not listen to anyone else about your calling. Don't let anyone else decide what you should be doing. You should listen to yourself. And that is your calling, because your life wants to experience and express something through you. and you would know that in your heart. So I feel that he is helping Arjun here to on these practical aspects, because he understands, as in even in our discussions as we have moved forward in Karma Yoga, these are the questions which starts coming. Is it, I remember having even separate discussions with each one of you on these issues where such questions came as if, is it my ego telling me I should be doing this? Should I take break from work? Should I change the career? Should I make more time for meditation? Right? So we have these practical questions that, okay, I want to live a more intuitive life, a spiritual life. Do I need to change something? And if I need to change, what do I need to change? So I believe Krishna in this chapter is addressing some of those questions for us.
Yeah. Did you want to add something to that?
I mean, yeah, this was an amazing summary and clarification, which I think was very important, Kabir. Thank you for that. I feel in this chapter, it's also a bit like, I don't know if I just feel like that or if it's really like that a lot of terms and differentiations are coming together and are linked with each other. You know, in school we had like, you know, these words and then you needed to connect them, which ones belong together with like lines. And I feel a bit here we have several such structures, because even how knowledge is explained as the knowledge itself, the thing to be known, and then the doer, like the action of it. And then you have these three different types, and then with the cast thing, this is coming. So I feel everything is kind of like, you know, when you braid hair, like you're bringing this all somehow together to see what is maybe the optimal form. And another major takeaway for me, which I find very significant in this chapter, is that to really be so alert, or maybe alert is not such a great term, let's say to be awake, to see if you're really free from the result of what you are intuitively doing. You know, because I feel this desirability of a result or an outcome is often from the mind. I think in the last chapter we have also covered that the mind only knows what it knows till now, from like the mind functions on our past experiences, on memories and all that, you know, our mistakes or our successes, and from whom did we get validation, who rewarded it, where did we ourselves feel it was really great, da 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 da. So it's very easy then to do any further steps in life based on what we have felt in the past. And it's a very thin line to open yourself to always a new result that you do not want to control. And for that, I feel this chapter put really an emphasis on that this openness to what can come out of it is the magic in life, where we can be experiencing growth or expansion of ourselves and go beyond the limitations of our mind. We truly managed to be that open to any possibilities of what we're doing, and to stay with those steps and not expecting, oh, but if I do this, then this will happen, da 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 da. What the mind automatically tries to do in assumptions to decide. We can really still the mind or let the thoughts just pass and not interact with them and be that open. I think this is quite a masterpiece to achieve. And I think this is a quite great putting it all together at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. I find that a very strong life guidance as such.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think both of you have mostly shared, like, I agree that there's a big part of it is just also talking about those three types of how these three gunas affect, or how that quality shines in a lot of different things and how they are structured. So maybe as we discuss more, we can talk a bit about a few of those passages. But yeah, like I wrote some keywords, like I think it's talking about knowledge, action, doer, how all three of them are different depending on the quality, the guna, which is most strongly dominant in in the doer, for example, right? So if that particular guna is dominant, then how will that look like? And it also talked about understanding or intellect, how the intellect can be different for the three gunas, how even your will, how different types of will, and depending on their primary guna, can look very different. And even for that matter, how happiness, if it comes to from rajasic happiness, tamasic happiness, and sattvic happiness, how they are different. So big part of the chapter talks about these three gunas and how these different and their relations to also, like um, as you mentioned, Nadine, that there is a lot of structure between these words, and I got a little confused. I could not follow completely how they are linked to each other. And maybe I'll have some questions there. And towards the end, it talks about the caste system and why kind of. And I agree with Kabir that I don't know if you Kabir said this, but yeah, and I think the author mentions this, that it can be misread as a endorsement of the rigid caste system we have come to know later, but definitely it is not that. It is talking more about uh, the more natural intuition towards which you are inclined, and how following that is more important than being really good at, let's say, somebody else's dharma. And this is very relevant, right? Like, and I think we started the book by this question, and it kind of ends with that also. That it's still very hard to really figure out what's your own dharma. So there's a lot of practical guidance there, but figuring out that is still a journey in itself, basically. And yeah, and towards the end, I think it's talking about how once you are free from karma, if you are able to do more sattvic karma, and you are able to do this place or from where you're not attached to the outcome, and you have kind of the word tyag, which is renunciating the outcome of your action. Once you are living there and you're free from karma, how that can lead to liberation eventually, and how that can lead to a union with the Brahman. That is, a couple of passages are there on that. And it finally closes with, which is, I think, in reference to what we are doing. Like, so it was good to read that, that how one, that knowledge which is shared in Gita should not be shared with people who are probably not in the right mindset or are not sincere enough to. So it warns against sharing that knowledge with people like that. And it also says that sharing this knowledge is something which is one of the highest things somebody can do. And Krishna mentions that that is always very dear to him, that people who do that. So that was an interesting thing to read. And yeah, and I think where the question started, as this is the last chapter, the question was from Arjuna, how should I kill anyone from my family? And then Lord Krishna says that this is very interesting for me, because it kind of answers a very interesting question of choice and destiny. But like Krishna explains that it's your choice at the end of the day. I hope that I've told you all of this, and now you can take a better decision. And so it was interesting to see. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but it did give the choice back to Arjun on what to do. And I read that as a very subtle answer to that question of, do we really have a choice or not? And the God does say, so you have a choice, even after hearing all of this, whether you want to go ahead or not. And then it also gives the warning that if you don't go with your nature or with your dharma, you will still end up doing that, because you're kind of, it will happen basically, right? Like, even if you don't follow, somehow that nature of yours will show up in a very even if you delude yourself from that, it will happen. So that was interesting, I think, like, again, something to talk about. And yeah, and then Arjuna acknowledges finally that, yes, thank you for sharing this, and now I know that I need to follow your will, he says, I think, somewhere, but it's basically God's will and also your own will. There's a symbolism there. And finally, this story is being told by Sanjay. Is that right, Kabir? Like,
Yes, Sanjay. Yes.
Sanjay, right? So finally, Sanjay acknowledges that it was really nice to hear all of this, because he was the one who was narrating the whole story through his through his vision. So yeah. we start somewhere? Like, should I want to talk about a few passages, but maybe we can talk about the choice thing, Kabir. I found that very interesting. That after 18 chapters, Krishna hands back the choice to Arjuna in terms of what to do.
Yeah. This has always been quite fascinating in philosophy, destiny versus choice. And if viewers or you too, if you have watched the Matrix trilogy, the movies, right? I think maybe in the last one, probably, or the second last, there was a point where this character Neo, he visits the oracle, right? And he asks us, she offers, I think, some peanuts or something. Would you like to have it? And he says, but you already know the answer to what I'm going to say, because that's how she was. And she says something very interesting. She says, yes, that choice is made. True. I have to ask this and I know your answer. But you are here. And he said, then why am I here or something? She says, you're not here to make a new choice. You are here to understand why you are making this choice. Right. So it's very interesting. So I don't want to go too much into that, because I think it's one of those areas which are impossible to put logically. It's one of those paradoxes in spirituality. But I would say this much, that as a person, as a body mind, as Arjun, we are making choices every moment. We make choice to do this session, or if I may say, apparent choices, right? Something in us makes us feel that we want to do something, and then we try our best to do that. It feels like a choice, definitely. And at that level, yes, we make a choice. So at that level, Krishna is uh, throughout the conversation, not just at the very end. Actually, Krishna hasn't really spoken in a way that everything is pre-decided and there's no need for this conversation. He is trying to answer questions. He is trying to clarify Arjun's doubt, and kind of, holding his hands and walking the path. And all this time, he is like a guide who is actually allowing Arjun to disagree, or to ask questions, or to explore subject. At no point he says, do what I'm telling. I'm the consciousness and you have to do whatever I'm asking you to do, whether your intellect agrees or not. He is engaging with his intellect. He's compassionate enough, also patient. A lot of patience is there. And at this level, I believe, coming back to, I guess, our own journey, let's connect it to ourselves, I guess, as Arjunas, right? As people on the journey, inner journey, we we do feel that we choose to go within when we go outside and kind of try to find happiness outside, from the objects, from the goals, from the relationships. After a while, we see that, oh, this is all pretty much in a flux, and I'm not finding the stability. And then we choose to reconnect with them, right? So at that level, I feel all the seekers, as long as they are seekers, uh, they have to make that choice. And I guess it is being clarified in this way at the end.
Yeah. There's a mention, like in a very early chapter, it says, early part of the chapter, certain kinds of action, self-sacrifice, giving, and self-discipline should be continued. I could not really understand the difference there, basically. Like, I know, like, again, like, are there any specific, maybe Hindi words, or sacrifice, giving, and discipline? Why are they?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is one of those things, like we have seen in few of the chapters which are relevant to those times. Basically, if I may summarize, it's more like inner journey, because sacrifice, the literal Sanskrit word would be yagya, right? So people, a lot of them used to think of it as a ritual. So people who read Bhagavad Gita in terms of seeing Krishna as a person or as God outside of us, and they would translate it into, oh, see, he's suggesting that you should do the havan, the yagya, the external ritual. But people who understand it in a more deeper way and see Krishna as the consciousness within, would see it as what is called sacrifice, is detachment from the action. Like karma yoga is also a sort of living a life of karma yogi is like sacrificing the, because you're detaching yourself from the actions, right? And so on. So in general, these three terms are indicating that uh, basically you prioritizing your inner journey and living a life on those lines is what Krishna is recommending to Arjun. Of course, he's not, in fact, he's not rejecting life of a monk, but in this conversation, he's suggesting that is not the only way. And in fact, he's also clarifying that some people think that life of a monk means they have renounced everything. And Krishna clarifies when he says renounced, what is the difference? Let me maybe spend a minute on that. So Krishna has clarified here that life of monk is where someone renounces certain actions and responsibilities. Somebody decides to disconnect from the family and says, okay, I'm not going to make a livelihood. You can take all this money, and I'm sorry, even if I'm married, I'm so sorry, I'm walking away from this path. I need to be a monk, I need to be a nun, and I'm going to focus on my inner journey. Sometimes people think that they are renouncing all the responsibilities, but if you meet any authentic nun or monk, they end up taking a lot of responsibilities. It's just not the responsibilities of their family. Sometimes they have taken up responsibilities of an ashram or a community of nuns. Like I was talking to Nadine the other day, how there is a beautiful nunnery in Himachal where I think she would be visiting. So you would see there are 100 nuns there, and they have so many responsibilities of, cooking or cleaning or creating the newsletter or looking after well-being of nuns. And there is a lot of work. So Krishna is clarifying that as long as you have body mind, it is impossible to not have any responsibilities. But yeah, a sannyasi, a renunciate chooses to take different responsibilities than mainstream traditional family responsibilities. And so he's not putting it down, he's just clarifying that Arjuna, that is not your path, and that's not necessary, that's not the only way. If you can renounce attachment to the fruits of actions, if you can understand, like as a kshatriya, as a warrior, Arjuna has tendencies to fight against injustice. So Krishna is saying that is your dharma. You don't have to take on dharma of a sannyasi, of a renunciate. If it may be good for someone else but not for you, and he's saying that following your dharma is better than following anybody else's dharma, even if it seems better to you from outside, but uh, you are not drawn to that. You would, from within, you can't see uh, injustice happening to a human being and walk away. Maybe someone else can, but you cannot. So for you, the dharma is to take action on this battlefield to fight against injustice, but don't fight as a person. Know that your presence and staying as that witness, you act. So again and again in this chapter, several places, Krishna clarifies that the sattvic gun, people who are on the inner journey, are driven by sattva. They don't act as a person, they don't act with an agenda, with an attachment to result. They don't care uh, whether they'll win or, well, they care, they want to win, but they are not attached, they don't mind losing. They are more interested in doing the right thing, what they believe is the right thing, what is their inner calling, and they don't mind losing doing the right thing rather than winning doing the wrong thing. And I hope we are getting the context of right and wrong here in the right way. So I think that
I think if I would split that to in like more our daily lives, how these situations come up is like, for example, if somebody's doing a job and they don't like it, but even though it might give them the definition of success from a social perspective, so even though they might be really good at it and they're getting paid well for it and everybody is very happy, like validating their success on that path. But if they don't feel drawn to it, then and they might feel that they might fail if they end up following their passion in a specific direction, then it's basically the book is saying it's better to fail at your own dharma and than to succeed on somebody else's dharma. And I think that is something which is very useful, because for people like these kind of choices come to a lot of people, and it's not an easy choice to make a lot of times. But at least the book kind of tells you that the answer is very clear, and that you have to follow what your inner calling is, even if it means failing at it. So
Yeah, thanks for connecting it to our daily life here, and I agree absolutely. Emphatically, in fact, Krishna is saying doing any other way would be disastrous, Arjuna. He is not suggesting follow your heart. He's saying you must follow your heart. If you don't, it will be a disaster. So, and you are right. Overwhelming majority of people in mainstream, they are doing things because they are supposed to be doing it. Because if I don't do this, where would I pay the rent from? My parents would be disappointed. What would happen? What would society say? Right? So they are doing things out of fear of what will happen if they leave, rather than that it's if it is their heart's calling. And here Krishna is pretty emphatic: follow your heart.
actually, I'm just reading the passage, so this is very relevant passage here, that to renounce one's responsibilities is not fitting. The wise call such deluded renunciation tamasic. So basically, where if you're just not simply fulfilling your responsibilities, that's what is called tamasic. And then it says that to avoid action from fear or difficulty or physical discomfort is rajasic. So anything where it's coming out of fear, that if which I think a lot of times is fear of failure, or it can be um fear of, like, when we're talking about easy versus the right thing to do. So sometimes the right thing is harder to do and easier thing is easier to do. And I think that's where it's referring to as rajasic. Uh, and it says there's no reward in such renunciation, but to fulfill your responsibilities, knowing that they're obligatory, while at the same time desiring nothing for yourself. This is sattvic renunciation.
Yeah, I feel like saying something here, and I think Nadine also. I'll just quickly add something because I am a bit passionate about this part here. I have seen people in judging others, people like, for example, me, even, and maybe you both have also experienced that if you, for example, choose to step away from something in the mainstream, from a job, from a place, from a work which is highly paid to a low paid, right? And they might in fact quote Bhagavad Gita and say, see, it is said that if you leave your responsibility, it is tamasic. That's what you're doing. You're leaving your responsibility. You are a householder. Your responsibility is to make as much money as possible for your family, right? See, the same passage, how can it be understood? And in fact, Krishna is saying just the opposite. He is in fact suggesting follow your heart, follow your calling. If you understand it deeply, it's very different from if you try to understand it superficially. So I just find it very interesting, ironic also, how same text can be understood in very different ways. Nadine?
Yeah, and I wanted to add here also that it also takes a bit of work and self-awareness, that you understand what is actually what comes out of your heart. Because the way we're growing up and we're conditioned, we really, I mean, for myself, I could see how much of values and principles in life I took on from my parents, my family, my peers, how I grew up. And I made it my own, So I could also see that even as an adult, a lot of my choices basically also happened on that, although I thought that I made independent choices. So to really discover this subtle line of where you think you made an independent choice from your own, or where it actually comes from a subconscious blind spot conditioning of value systems that you took on, which you think you didn't, but you actually do. This is a very tricky thing because it's not easily said also, but follow your heart, listen to your intuition. I mean, get there. Like, this is really a journey to get there, to connect with yourself, even to feel your body, to feel the sensations. I think this is why yoga, asanas are there, why the meditation, the breath work. I mean, all of this helps us to first connect with our body, but then really to see if our actions are truly driven by our heart, by who we are. It takes a lot to get there. At least I can say from my own experience on my journey, what has been revealing over the last years to me, where I really got shocked even that I didn't notice that I'm still driving on some unaware conditionings. So, and to really like take these layers off. I don't know, maybe it's a lifelong process. I have no idea. But I think this is a starting point before we think we're driven by our heart. Because what do we truly enjoy? This is really something to find out.
Yes.
Right. So it talks about 5 elements necessary for accomplishment of every action. And it refers to the Sankhya philosophy for that. It says the body, the means, the ego, the performance of the act, and the divine will. If you can help like explain these words to me, like the body, I think that's still very self-explanatory. What I got confused was the means, and then it says the ego, the performance of the act, and the divine will.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you should excuse me. I would ask for your forgiveness to begin with, because I'm not very good at, like I said, going into theoretical aspects of each, and I may be wrong there. It would be my interpretation rather than I don't know exactly what would Krishna be hinting here. But how I understand this is, what he's suggesting for anything to happen in this universe, right? Like for example, I would take an example to clarify what I understand. Like for these kind of sessions to happen, we are sitting in 3 different cities, 3 of us, and for this to happen, there has to be, of course, our bodies, the will. There has to be technology available today in the world, that 3 people sitting in 3 different parts of cities can talk to each other, the visual, the audio, the technology, right? And of course, the audience who would be interested in listening to this kind of a discussion. All of those things have made it possible, right? So what Krishna is saying, that it's not just that you as an individual entity is capable. So he's kind of challenging the idea of our egoic mind. There are people who might say that I created this video, I created this tool, and here you go, and I made so much money. It's very easy for egoic mind to take ownership and become arrogant in that way. And also, because of that, it also takes failure on himself or herself. No, I failed at it. So Krishna is kind of clarifying here that for things to happen, there are so much factors. Your body, mind is just one little factor among many factors. So you can be made part of certain actions, but they are enabled because so many other forces are happening and enabling that. Right? Uh, a lot of people who are able to connect sometimes with big masses, who are wise enough, acknowledge this fact that I couldn't be doing this if not because of so many people enabling that, right? And they have that humility. And people who have seen ups and downs, I know I can think of a couple of celebrities who kind of mentioned that when they saw the down and then they came back up, and they say, oh my god, it gave me so much wisdom and context. I used to think I'm so great, people would always be behind me, and I became a nobody. I was on the street. And I'm lucky enough, I'm so grateful that I'm lucky enough to be back in the position of wealth and recognition and fame. But it gave me all that it gave me a lesson that it was not me who was great. So many things were lined up for me to get what I got. So it is, I believe, that is the purpose why Krishna is highlighting this to Arjun, that you are sitting here in this war. It's not just you who are able to do the war. Your weapons should work, and all the support system should be there, and you have been offered this opportunity to do this. Just do your bit. Don't try to put yourself in any arrogant position, or even take too more responsibility than which is due to you.
But Kabir, I think this is exactly where this openness is required, right? Things can only fall in place if we are truly open for these things. I think this is, again, going back to that sentence that you're not having this attachment or desire of the outcome of your steps or your action, right? Only maybe then things can beautifully fall in place if we allow them to align in a way that we may not expect, and it may be even better than we could have imagined.
Yes.
That makes sense, I think. Yeah. And I think that's like the next part is very interesting, but it then says that if you're doing something, so it says that every action has to have the body, the means, the ego, the action itself, like the performance of the action, and the divine will. And then it says that so people who are able to then kind of get rid of the ego, then they are not bound by their actions, because then, and which I think has been throughout the, we have been talking about this, that how when you are in the presence, when you're in the consciousness, then if you do anything that's coming from a more divine place, then it doesn't create basically karma for you. So there's a reference to that. Yeah.
Okay. Adin.
So I just wanted to add here, like Shashank, what you pointed out, what all needs to come together and fall in place. And the mind is one of these pieces, right? So, and I think a lot in spirituality and around mind and all that is about, it's sometimes almost like the mind is our enemy, right?
Yeah.
So it's often like in meditation, the goal is how to still your mind, how to not have any thoughts. I think a lot of people are trying to get there when they meditate. So it's almost like you need to battle your mind at times. I feel like when these discussions are coming up. But now in this, what you just highlighted, it shows that the mind is a very useful piece in it. It's just from which space does it function, and from which space does it translate your thoughts and ideas? Is it coming on your past patterns, conditionings, and memories and experiences? Or does your mind operate from your heart space and gives you the intuition, ideas in form of thoughts, or even what you say or what you may write down or what you act? Does that so I feel basically the mind is really a messenger, and it's about how this messenger works. And I find it beautiful that it's a piece of the totality that you need to bring yourself out in this world, and to see that it's not it can be your enemy, of course, but it isn't your enemy, basically. It's a messenger, and it's about how you're using it, how it's operating. And I feel that's an important point to add somehow here as well.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. I think it further goes and says it kind of removes that ownership also in a way. It says that the intellect or the mind itself is in primarily one of the three gunas, right? And then this describes that, to know, and I'm reading the passage now, to know when to act and when to refrain from action, what is right action, what is wrong, what brings security, what insecurity, what brings freedom and what bondage. These are the signs of a sattvic intellect. And then it describes the rajasic intellect, and then it describes the tamasic intellect. So I think in a way it's also how your intellect is behaving will kind of drive your actions in a certain way.
And I add to this because I find it also very important to highlight here that we can learn so much from nature, from the cycles that are happening in nature, because I feel that in our societal conditioning, it's about you need to be on a high performing level. You need to always manifest or materialize something, get it to another level, achieve another step. There's this urge of constantly moving, while we actually can see nature from its cycles through the seasons, or how a plant grows and dies, or how leaves are shed and then they grow new, that we also have phases in life where there needs to be patience, where things take their own time, and to allow that too, and not get stressed out or feel frustrated, or it's maybe even okay to feel all of that, but just to know that things will also roll at some point again. Like, this is something that I at least need to tell me sometimes in daily life, when I feel like I'm trying to give so much energy, but somehow it's not going. Actually, I read in a book a very nice example for that, about sea turtles. So sea turtles, they are swimming in the sea when the current takes them out. And this is how they actually get really fast and out. And when the current is not there, they just remain in the water and they wait for the right time when they actually put their energy in, and then they actually go. And I feel this is a very important reminder, that what you just read out, Shashank, to know when it's time to act and when it's time to just be, or just be patient about the process and trust that things will fall in place.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that wisdom itself is a sign of sattvic wisdom in some ways. I think, and then I think it's how do you cultivate more of that, right? How do you kind of cultivate more of sattvic will and wisdom? I think becomes the question, because and that's where, and I don't know where I heard this, but like your action becomes your intellect in a way, right? Like what you are doing right now will lead to that kind of intellect eventually, and that's why it's very like you should be very careful with what you're thinking, because your thoughts are becoming actions, your actions are becoming eventually your intellect, and then your intellect is then further defining what kind of actions you're going to do. So is that very difficult cycle to escape then, actually? Because if you end up in that cycle, Kabir, how do you get out of it?
I feel that it would be difficult if we want to escape it as an individual using intellect with the willpower. It might be in fact impossible, not just difficult, very frustrating and eventually impossible. But when we go to the space of beingness, when we come to the present moment, when we drop our autobiographies, when we drop attachment to the results, basically, when we are living in the now as the space of presence, when our identity disappears even for a few minutes, in that space, this happens spontaneously. And it's so you may say that it's very simple, like Nanak said, and like all the spiritual guides have clarified, that to escape from the tendencies or patterns is very simple. You just have to drop out your autobiography and agenda and be in the moment, and you're free of your entire past, of all your karmas. But it's not at all easy. It's very simple, but it's not at all easy, because the tendencies are pulling us, even in the form of anxiety coming up, the fears coming up, the thoughts coming up, the voice in our head reminding us, are you really sure you want to step away from your job? Are you really sure you want to follow this art? It's really scary. Come on. Probably let's make some more money. Come on. Don't listen to you. Aren't you being reckless? Aren't you running away from your responsibilities? So it's not simple. It's not easy, I'm sorry, to ignore this voice unless you're really rooted and you can differentiate. This is who I am, and who is this talking? This is not me. This is the egoic voice here. So I guess even if I talk in terms of easy or difficult, I guess there is some grace required, and there is some chicken and egg here also. Because if we are identified with the voice in our head, we are still operating primarily as egos, as egoic identity. It does feel very difficult, and you almost wish that there is some grace, some guide, And even you need some grace to even trust that guide, like Krishna, right? That okay, can you please? I'm feeling cluttered. I'm feeling confused. What do you feel? And some words come either from outside or from within, or a YouTube, where you just have that moment of clarity and you get your answer, right? And then you connect back to your intuition. And once you are in your heart, once you are feeling intuitive, then suddenly you can see, oh, this is egoic voice. I don't have to hear that. Then it feels, oh my God, it was so easy. Why did it take me so long? But I hope we can get it.
I can relate to it a lot, but yeah, probably it's uh, yeah. I think this whole journey is about this only, right? What we're talking, like how do you get out of that space, and how do you get into the space of consciousness? Uh, and I think understanding all of this is very helpful, like uh, because as you're reading this chapter, there's a lot of explanation, like there are a lot of things you can relate to so much, uh, like which I don't know if I read this before I would have been able to do it or not. Like so that's where it gets a little like how much of it is divine will. Like can you just read this and really get out of this? Probably not, right? Like this is more like it goes one step together. You move a little forward, you understand the text a little better, and or maybe the text shows up eventually when you're ready in some way to grasp it. And then maybe you can go through that cycle multiple times of reading the text to further understand the nuances of your own behavior. But it felt like as I was reading the book and this chapter, a lot of it is very descriptive. It just describes how these different forces are interacting and how it is, how you can, it's like a mirror. You can look at your behavior and tell what you're operating in. Um, or you can kind of choose to act in a certain way or start making your life which enables more of the sattvic actions. And I don't think so as these two are two different things, because you can't just force it out of yourself. So you can look at in one way that your current actions and their motivations can describe what you are in, and also how you can tailor your behavior in very maybe subtle ways, because I don't truly believe you can completely change your behavior to move more towards more sattvic kind of a place eventually.
Nadine, would you want to say something? No, not right now. I just felt that maybe you would. I know I've heard from Nadine this thing in the past that yes, when you are we even if we are doing sessions, maybe 2 months later, the same chapter, we would have different insights, maybe more deeper insights. So definitely agree with you that whenever, call it Bhagavad Gita or any guidance which is coming from the space of presence, deep presence, like Bhagavad Gita, text like Bhagavad Gita, right? They are more like hints and pointers, and they are kind of attacking in different ways. Like she said, Nadine said in the beginning, she gave example of how same thing is being said in so many different ways, and you can join them. They feel like a family of you know connections here. And enlightened being out of compassion, and they know how egoic mind is, how it operates. They say things in so many different ways that no matter how this egoic mind brings up a new shell, a new perspective, it gets attacked in different different ways also, right? And also at different points when we are reading this text, and of course I experienced that over not a couple of decades, I think, that every time I visit Bhagavad Gita, I always say, oh, I didn't notice this earlier. So in every reading, I would say something new comes out. That's the greatness of guidance from enlightened being, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Kabir, for pointing this out. This is absolutely true, because I can also see it's actually even nice to review the sessions we did over the year, because whatever was being shared, if you look at what's happening in our personal lives right now, somehow whatever the text is saying and what we are sharing, what we feel about it, or what it means for us, it's somehow related to where we are at right now in our life. So that's why it's very beautiful to go back to that book also and read it again, maybe, and see what it reveals, as you just said for yourself. Like, you have read it like decades ago. Sounds like you're an ancient being now. Oh, yeah, but it's like exactly like this. Everything has new or less layers of the truth covering up. Yeah.
And I also feel like when Shashank was talking about these aspects, I also felt that when he said that, okay, how do we really know? Because we also mentioned how the same text can be, if read just through intellect or egoic mind, how you can understand it completely in the opposite way. Many people read Bhagavad Gita and they see it in a very simplistic terms, that okay, I'm a householder, so this is my dharma. I am old, so this is my dharma, right? And I'm a student, so this is my dharma. These are very simplistic terms, and they then interpret everything from that perspective and so on. But he said something that how do we then know, which is a deeper perspective and so on. And it seems so difficult also sometimes to figure it out, or even to move. How do we know that we don't get uh, stuck in tamasic or rajasic spaces, and how do we move to sattvic spaces? And I think this leads to now what Krishna talks in his last verses to Arjun. He is very emphatic in saying, of course, we should understand here Krishna as the consciousness within Arjun, right? So the pure consciousness within us, within all seekers, within Arjun is saying very, very emphatically, keep your mind on me. You should want me no matter what you're doing. So I think 5 or 6 times in his last few verses, he's very emphatically saying, there's nothing more important than me, Arjun. I am in control of everything. I'm Lord of the universe. The consciousness within you, keep your heart on me no matter what you're doing. So if you are in love with me, if you're devoted to me, if you surrender to me, if you never forget me, I love you and I will take care of you. You are my favorite. Consciousness is saying that I am your well wisher, my friend. Just be with me. If you are loyal to your egoic mind, you have the choice. The consciousness is saying you have a choice. I have shared with you how much better it is if you hold my hand. But if you want to hold hand of your egoic mind, if you want to be driven by fears, that's okay. That's your choice. But I want to tell you, I'm your friend. I love you. I will take care of you. Just just don't forget me. Be with me and you'll be taken care of.
Very true. And I think here I also would like to highlight how important it is what we're doing right now. That satsang, we call it, or our regular exchange, reading this chapter together, talking about it, because that keeps this Krishna alive in all of us. When we are having these conversations and these exchanges on such a level, on such text or whatever truly moves us within, like, that's also how a community can support each other, how we bring this Krishna in us into a real life, that we're really listening to it. I think it's very encouraging when we're coming together and having this talk. So for me, that's what this journey also has been about. It keeps me awake to challenge my mind with what I'm doing, like this fruitful action, not being attached to the outcomes. I think we're talking about it. It gives again feeds into the subconscious to remember this, and these conversations are keeping it alive. So I hope whoever is watching that also may find their groups to further discuss these things. Yeah.
I know it's so beautifully concluded by Nadine, I think. They are such apt words towards the end of the book discussion. And I know Shashank has also shared separately, individually with me, how when he's listening to these discussions, he is a participant and he's listening to these discussions and he's discovering new things when he's listening to the discussion, sometimes to himself even. Talking about the subject is giving him insight, right? And our editor has in fact shared this, that when he's listening to this, just trying to edit, and he says, "Oh, I feel connected to presence, doing the work of editing." So I think it is really, we should be grateful to audiences also, because they have been giving us feedbacks to Shashank, to me, to you, Nadine, that we know that there are people who are encouraging us to please don't stop, please carry on and finish this. And we want to listen. Some of them are saying we are at chapter 4 now, and but I'm giving exams, after exam I'll continue. So don't leave it, finish it up, and you are doing a good job. So encouraging us and giving us opportunity for this satsang, right? We are not doing it for audiences. We know that it is benefiting us. And like Krishna said in this chapter, that so many things have to be in place for something like this to begin and continue and to reach conclusion. So we should be very grateful that our yagya, this Gita yagya, could start. And it started with from Shashank's intention actually and enthusiasm. So we are grateful to him. And it has continued, and we all have been able, like, universe has allowed us. It feels like a small thing, but in many ways, for beings who are touched and us, it is, we should realize how important it is, how the value of this basically is immense. So thank you.
I think Vijay put it so beautifully. And yeah, there's just a lot of gratitude for obviously our viewers, for Kabir, you, and obviously for Nadine, for all of us that we were able to do this. And yeah, and I think there's a lot of grace which has helped us kind of have these 18 sessions, record them. Big shout out to Neo, who has been our editor on this. And he has, I think, taken a very raw footages from our laptops, our average phones, and done a great job at putting them out. So a big thank you to Neo too for putting these out very consistently to our viewers. And yeah, like I would like to end with, I think it says, Arjun, you are my favorite. I think it's like, and I think Kabir, you also didn't say Arjun, and I also read it like that. So it's the consciousness, it's God telling us that you are my favorite. And with that thought, I'd like to leave our viewers, and hopefully we'll be back with some other series. But till then, thank you so much, and lot of gratitude for helping us enable this for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Shashank. Thanks, Nadine. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, both of you.